Hi, in this video we will read about neonatal seizures from AIMS and ICU protocol. Let's start. Neonatal seizures are the most distinctive clinical manifestation of the neurological dysfunction in neonates. Fine. Infants with the neonatal seizures are at high risk of death during the neonatal period and neurological impairment, epilepsy disorders in the later life. Though mortality due to the neonatal seizures has decreased from 40% to about 7 to 20% over the years, the prevalence of the long-term neurodevelopmental sequelae has largely remained unchanged. Close to 30% neonates with the neonatal seizures develop cerebral palsy. Like this is a very heartbreaking number that neonates having seizures, and almost 30% of them will develop cerebral palsy. 15 to 35% develop epilepsy, and 50% have developmental delay. Almost 50% have developmental delay. They pose a significant clinical challenge for physicians in the low and middle income countries. Delayed recognition of the neonatal seizure is possibly a major contributor to its poor outcome, considering that the neonatal seizure may be very difficult to recognize clinically. Epidemiology. The National Neonatal Perinatal Database 2002 to 3, which collected data from the 18 tertiary care units across the country, reported the incidence of 10.3 per thousand live births. Recent reports from the low and middle income countries report an incidence of 36 to 90 per thousand live births, whereas the incidence in the high income countries is 1 to 3 per thousand live births. The incidence was found to increase with the decreasing gestation and birth weight. Preterm infants. So the incidence was increased in whom? Incidence was increased with decreasing gestation and birth weight. Okay. Preterm infant has almost twice the incidence when compared to term neonates. This is also very important that preterm are at higher risk of neonatal seizures. While every very low birth weight infant had more than fourfold higher incidence, and very low birth weight has even higher incidence. Okay, coming to the definition now. Seizures is defined clinically as a paroxysmal alteration in the neurologic function. There is what? There is alteration in what? In neurologic function, that is motor behavior or autonomic function. Neonatal seizures can be of the following types: electrographic seizures, that is paroxysmal abnormality in cortical electrical activity that evolves over time. Electroclinical seizure, electrographic seizure with associated clinical signs. These kind of seizure can only be identified by EEG monitoring, and some studies indicate that EEG only seizures may constitute as much as 70 to 80% of the neonatal seizures. Okay, so there are certain seizures, electroclinical seizures, in which can be detected only by the EEG, and they are about 70 to 80% of the neonatal seizure. Now, coming to the classification, four clinically evident type of the neonatal seizures have been recognized. How many types? Four types. First one is the subtle seizures. The clinical manifestation are mild motor behavioral or autonomic paroxysm and may often be missed. They are the most common type, constituting about 50% of all the seizures are subtle seizures. Some kind of the subtle seizures in the full term newborns do not have an EEG correlate, that is, they are clinical only. Okay, so there will not be any EEG changes in some kind of subtle seizures, there will be only clinical changes. Common examples of the subtle seizures include ocular, ocular in which there is tonic horizontal deviation of the eye, more common in the term. There is tonic horizontal deviation of the eye or sustained eye opening with ocular fixation, more common in the preterm. Fine, this sustained eye opening thing is more common in the preterm, or cycled fluttering, and this ocular one is more common in the term. Orofacial lingual movements, chewing, tongue thirsting, or lip smacking. This is another kind of subtle seizures in which orofacial lingual movements are involved, in which there is chewing movements, tongue thirsting, or lip smacking involved. Now, coming to the limb movements. In limb movements, there is cycling, paddling, boxing jabs, and hooking. So, these are all the limb movements. Autonomic phenomena, there will be tachycardia or bradycardia will be associated with subtle seizures, and apnea. Apnea may be a rare manifestation of seizures, particularly in the term infants. Apnea due to the seizure activity has an accelerated or a normal heart rate when evaluated 20 seconds after onset. Bradycardia is thus not an early manifestation in convulsive apnea but may occur later due to the prolonged hypoxemia. Now, the second kind of seizure is clonic seizure. They involve rhythmic movement of the muscle groups with a rapid phase followed by a slow return. They occur at a frequency of 1 to 3 jerks per second and commonly associated with EEG changes. They are what? They occur at a frequency of 1 to 3 jerks per second and commonly associated with EEG changes. Clonic seizures may be focal clonic, that is localized, not associated with loss of consciousness. Multifocal clonic, that is simultaneous, sequential jerking in the multiple locations, non Jacksonian migration, or generalized clonic seizure, which is rare in neonates. Okay. What was happening in multifocal clonic seizure? There was simultaneous sequential jerking in multiple locations. Non-Jacksonian migration is seen. And the third type is the tonic seizures. This refers to the sustained flexion or extension of the axial or appendicular muscle groups. There is what? There is sustained either flexion or extension. These seizures may be focal or generalized and often resemble decerebrate, that is tonic extension of all the limbs, or decorticate posture, flexion of the upper limbs and extension of the lower limbs. So they resemble a decerebrate or a decorticate posturing. Generalized tonic seizures are not associated with the EEG changes in around 85% of the cases and may represent a brainstem release phenomena secondary to severe brain injury. Okay, this was the third type, and the fourth type is the myoclonic seizures. They manifest as a single or multiple lightning fast jerks of the upper and lower limbs. As what? They manifest as what? Single or multiple lightning fast jerks of the upper limb or lower limbs and are usually distinguished from the clonic movements because of the rapid frequency of myoclonic jerks, absence of the slow return, and predilection of the flexor muscle groups. Common changes seen on the EEG include burst suppression pattern, focal sharp waves, and hips arrhythmia. So there will be changes in the EEG and they include what? There is burst suppression pattern, focal sharp waves, and hips arrhythmia. Myoclonic seizures carry the worst prognosis in terms of the neurodevelopmental outcome and seizure recurrence, and focal clonic seizures have the best prognosis. This is important to remember that myoclonic seizures have the worst prognosis and focal seizures have the best prognosis. Focal clonic seizures. A note on the ILAE 2021 classification of the neonatal seizures. The ILAE has recently given a new classification for the neonatal seizure, wherein seizures are defined only as a electroclinical or electrical, but clinical events without an EEG correlate were defined as non-seizure episode. Further, new descriptive terms were used to classify seizures such as sequential seizures and automatism. However, in view of paucity of EEG availability in most neonatal units in our setting and ambiguity surrounding the new classification, we continue to use the clinical classification of seizures currently. Why? Because of EEG unavailability in most of the NICU units. Even we don't have it. Now coming to the etiology of neonatal seizures. Majority of the neonatal seizures are acute symptomatic seizures with only 10 to 15% occurring at as the first manifestation of epilepsy. So this means that there are certain epilepsy syndromes, but most of the seizures that occur are they are acute symptomatic seizures with only 10 to 15% as a part of what epilepsy syndromes. Etiology of the neonatal seizures differ in the LMIC, that is low or middle income countries, with hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, intracranial infection, and transient metabolic disturbances being the much more common as compared to those in the high income countries. Fine. So, what are the major causes of neonatal seizures in the low income country like India? Low or middle income country like hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, intracranial infections, and transient metabolic disturbances like hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia. They are much more common as compared. They're much more common. That's it. Fine. However, etiology can vary between different centers depending upon the patient population, term versus preterm, levels of monitoring, only clinical versus electrical, and clinical seizures. So there's something called hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. HIE secondary to the perinatal asphyxia is the most common cause of neonatal seizures. Right. Most seizures due to HIE, about 50 to 65%, have onset within the 12 to 24 hours of life, while the rest manifest by 24 to 48 hours of life. Okay. Additional problems like hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia, and intracranial hemorrhage may coexist in neonates with the perinatal asphyxia and should always be excluded. Fine. Perinatal variables such as the Apgar scores do not predict the occurrence of seizures. Subtle seizures are the most common type of the seizures in the neonates with HIE. Metabolic causes. Okay, so the first cause that we read about as the cause of neonatal seizure is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Fine. And the second cause that we will read about is other metabolic causes. Common metabolic causes of the seizures include hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia, both early and late onset, hypomagnesemia, and hypo and hypernatremia. Rare causes include the several inborn errors of metabolism, like non-ketotic hyperglycemia, urea cycle defects, mitochondrial disorders, Zellweger syndrome, etc. Pyridoxine-dependent seizures and the folinic acid-responsive seizures, etc. Now coming to the infections, bacterial meningitis usually cause seizures in the later part of the first week of the life and should be excluded in all the neonates with seizures. This is the third cause. Fine. After hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy and metabolic causes, the third cause are infections. So this bacterial meningitis usually cause seizures in the later part of the usually cause seizures when in the later part of the first week of life and should be excluded in all the neonates with seizures. This is very important to remember that when does the infections usually manifest? Cause seizures in the later part of the first week of life. Meningoencephalitis, secondary to the intrauterine infections like the TARS group or the syphilis, may also be present as seizures in the neonatal period. Okay. So there can be also meningoencephalitis can be happening, which is secondary to what intrauterine infections like the TARS infections or the syphilis, and they may also even present as the seizures in the neonatal period. Okay. Now the fourth one is intracranial hemorrhage and the vascular causes. Seizures due to the subarachnoid intraparenchymal or the subdural hemorrhage occur more often in the term neonates, while seizures secondary to the intraventricular hemorrhage occur in the preterm neonates. Fine. Fine. So here, just this is defined that if intraventricular hemorrhage is suspected, then it most commonly occurs in the preterm neonates, and the subarachnoid hemorrhage, intraparenchymal hemorrhage, or the subdural hemorrhage, they are more often in the term neonates. Most seizures due to the intracranial hemorrhage occur between 2 and 7 days of age. This is also a very important line that most of the seizures due to the intracranial hemorrhage occur between 2nd and 7 days of age. Seizures occurring in the term well baby on the day 2 or 3 of his life is often due to subarachnoid hemorrhage. Fine. What is written with the seizures in term and well baby on day 2 or 3 of his life, often due to subarachnoid hemorrhage. Ischemic stroke and the CSVT are also well known causes of the neonatal seizures, but are often missed due to a lack of clinical suspicion and neuroimaging. Moving ahead to the fifth cause, the four causes that we read were most common cause of neonatal seizure, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, then the metabolic causes, then infections, then intracranial hemorrhage and vascular causes. Then fifth cause comes the developmental defects. Cerebral dysgenesis and neuronal migration disorders are the rare cause of the seizures in the neonatal period. Now, coming to the miscellaneous ones, these include polycythemia, maternal narcotic withdrawal, drug toxicity like theophylline or doxapram, local anesthetic injection into the scalp, and the phacomatoses, etc. Example like the tuberous sclerosis or the incontinentia pigmenti. Accidental injection of the local anesthetic into the scalp may be suspected in the presence of fixed and dilated pupil and absence of doll's eye reflex. Multiclonic Multifocal clonic seizures on the fifth day of life may be related to low zinc levels in the CSF. This is also very different that multifocal clonic seizures on the fifth day of life, they are related to what? Low zinc levels in the CSF fluid. Benign idiopathic neonatal convulsion. Seizures due to the subarachnoid hemorrhage and late onset hypocalcemia carry a good prognosis for long term neurodevelopmental outcome. This is important. We should know about the how is the prognosis, right? So seizures due to what? Due to this subarachnoid hemorrhage and late onset hypocalcemia, they carry a good prognosis for long-term neurodevelopmental outcome, while seizures related to the hypoglycemia, cerebral malformations, and meningitis have high risk for adverse outcome. So this was all about the causes. Now coming to approach to an infant with the neonatal seizures. So if there is an infant with neonatal seizures in our ICU, how will we approach? First, we will start with the history. So we should take the seizure history. A complete description of the seizure should be obtained from the parents or the attendant. History of associated eye movements, restraint of the episode by the passive flexion of the affected limb. So whether the movement was restricted by the passive flexion of the limb or not. So if there is the movement stops on the passive flexion or the passive restriction of the limb, then it's not a seizure. It's probably a jitteriness. They are probably jitters. Changes in the skin color, that is mottling or cyanosis if seen, autonomic phenomena, and whether the infant was conscious sleeping at the time of the seizure should be elicited. If possible, the attendant should be asked to video record the event to understand the nature of the seizure. The day of the life on which the seizure first occurred may provide an important clue to its diagnosis. While seizures occurring on the day 1 to 3 might be related to perinatal asphyxia, intracranial hemorrhage, and metabolic causes, on the day 1 to 3, these are the most common causes. What are? These are perinatal asphyxia, intracranial hemorrhage, and metabolic causes. And those occur, these are between 1 to 3 days, and on the day 4 to 7 are more often due to the sepsis, meningitis, metabolic causes, and the developmental defects. So this was about the in history. First we took what? First we took the seizure history. Now in the second thing, there is something called as the antenatal history. History suggestive of the intrauterine infection, maternal diabetes. If there is any such history of intrauterine infections, maternal diabetes, and narcotic addiction should be elicited in the antenatal history. A history of sudden increase in the fetal movement may be suggestive of intrauterine convulsions also. Now coming to the perinatal history. So, perinatal asphyxia is the most common cause of the neonatal seizures, and a detailed history, including the history of fetal distress, was present or not. How were the fetal movements? Were there decreased fetal movements? Was it an instrumental delivery? Was there any need of resuscitation in the labor room? And what were the ABGAR scores and abnormal cord? pH less than 7 and base deficits more than 12 milliequivalents per liter should be obtained in the perinatal history. So we should take a detailed perinatal history, right? After that comes the feeding history. So in feeding history, clinical features like the lethargy, poor activity, drowsiness, and vomiting after initiation of the breastfeeding may be suggestive of inborn errors of metabolism. Late onset hypocalcemia should be considered in the presence of top feeding with the cow's milk. Okay. So if cow's milk is given, then we have to suspect what? Late onset hypocalcemia. And the last important point in the history should be family history. So, history of any consanguinity in the parents, and the family history of seizures if present, or intellectual disability, and early fetal or neonatal deaths would suggest inborn errors of metabolism. History of seizures in either parent or sibling in the neonatal period may suggest benign familial neonatal convulsions. Okay. Starting with the examination part, first one is the vital signs. So, heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, capillary refill time, temperature should be recorded in all the neonates. This need to be done in all, right? Heart rate, respiration, blood pressure, capillary refill time, and the temperature. So now the second thing is general examination. Gestation, birth weight, and the weight for age should be recorded as they may provide important clues to the etiology. For example, seizures in a term well baby may be due to subarachnoid hemorrhage, while seizures in a large for date neonate may be secondary to hypoglycemia. The neonate should be examined for the presence of any obvious malformation or the dysmorphic features. Jitteriness may be associated finding in the seizures due to hypoglycemia or hypocalcemia. Okay, now coming to the CNS examination. Presence of a bulging anterior fontanelle may be suggestive of meningitis or the intracranial hemorrhage. A detailed neurological examination should include the assessment of consciousness. In this, we have read this a lot of times that a detailed neurological examination should be done. But what is included in it, we haven't seen it right till now. So it includes the consciousness, tone, and the fundus examination for chorioretinitis. So in consciousness, there comes the whether the neonate is alert, drowsy, or comatose, how's the tone, hypotonia or hypertonia, and the fundus examination for chorioretinitis. Other systemic examinations are like the presence of hepatosplenomegaly or any abnormal urine order may be suggestive of inborn error of metabolism. The skin should be examined for the presence of any neurocutaneous markers. Skin for any neurocutaneous markers. Presence of hypopigmented macules or the ash leaf spot is suggestive of tuberous sclerosis. So these things also need to be ruled out. Now coming to the investigations part. So there are certain essential investigations that need to be done. This table depicts the investigations that should be considered in all the neonates with seizures. CSF examination should be done in all cases as seizures can be the first sign of meningitis. So there is something CSF examination should be done. It should not be omitted even if another etiology such as hypoglycemia is present. CSF study may be withheld if severe cardiorespiratory compromise is present or omitted in neonates with a severe birth asphyxia. Documented abnormal cord pH or the base axis in the onset of the seizures within 12 to 24 hours of life. So, because all these things documented abnormal cord pH and the base axis and seizures within 12 to 24 hours of life point towards the thing that the seizures are most probably due to perinatal asphyxia. So that's why we can leave out the CSF examination in these conditions. Examination required in a neonate with seizure. Let's see. So the essential investigation required in all the additional investigations with few exceptions. So these include, one second. Essential investigations are written here and additional investigations are written here. Let's start with the essential investigation, which is blood sugar, serum sodium and serum calcium, cerebrospinal fluid, cranial ultrasound, and fifth one is the electroencephalography and amplitude integrated EEG. Okay. Electroencephalography and the amplitude integrated EEG. These were all the essential investigations that should be done. Right. Blood sugar, serum sodium and calcium, CSF examination, cranial ultrasound, electroencephalography, and the amplitude integrated EEG. Now coming to the hematocrit. Hematocrit if the plethoric or at risk polycythemia, serum bilirubin if icteric, serum magnesium, arterial blood gas in the anion gap, lethargy, vomiting, family history, etc. Imaging, CT or MRI if no etiology found after the essential investigation. TOT screening for the congenital infections, workup for the inborn errors of metabolism. Moving ahead, one should carry out all these investigations even if one or more investigations are positive, as multiple etiologies may coexist, like sepsis, meningitis, and hypoglycemia. All these can coexist. Fine. Now coming to the additional investigations, these may be considered in the neonates who do not respond to a combination of phenobarbital and phenytoin, or earlier in the neonates with specific features. Fine. These include neuroimaging like the CT or the MRI, screening for the congenital infections like TORCH, and for the inborn errors of the metabolism. If an inborn error of metabolism is suspected, intrapartum seizures, refractory seizures, finding of HIE without any hypoxic insult, and progressive worsening. All these things will be seen. All these things will be seen when, if inborn error of metabolism is suspected, then intrapartum seizures, refractory seizures, findings of the HIV without any hypoxic insult, and progressive worsening. An arterial blood gas should be obtained. Additional investigation may also be required to identify the cause of metabolic abnormalities such as hypoglycemia or hypocalcemia. Now, coming to the imaging. Cranial USG is an excellent tool for detection of intraventricular and parenchymal hemorrhage, but lacks sensitivity for the subarachnoid hemorrhage and the subdural hemorrhage. Okay, cranial USG is excellent tool for what? For intraventricular hemorrhage and parenchymal hemorrhage, but lacks the sensitivity for what? For subarachnoid hemorrhage and subdural hemorrhage. It should be done in all the infants with seizures. This cranial USG should be done in all the infants with seizures. CT scan should be done in the term infants where subarachnoid hemorrhage is suspected and in infants with the suspected intrauterine infections. Wait, we read about cranial USG first. Okay, we read cranial USG. It is an excellent tool for this detection of intraventricular and parenchymal hemorrhage, and it should be done in all the infants with the seizures. Now, second thing that we are going to read about is the cranial CT scan. It should be done in term infants where subarachnoid hemorrhage is suspected and infant with the suspected intrauterine infections to identify any intracranial calcification. Okay, in whom it is done? Term infants where subarachnoid hemorrhage is suspected, and with those suspected intrauterine infections. Intrauterine infections to identify what? This intracranial calcifications. MRI, third imaging modality is the MRI. This is indicated in HIE, cerebral dysgenesis, lyssencephaly, and the other neuronal migration disorders. Fine. This is where MRI is important. MRI is needed. Where HIE, cerebral dysgenesis, lyssencephaly, and neuronal migration disorders. So this was the first point. In additional investigation, first one was the imaging. Second is the electroencephalogram, that is EEG. Conventional continuous electroencephalogram has both the diagnostic and prognostic role in the seizures. It is recommended in all the neonates in whom seizures are suspected. Okay, this thing is recommended in all the neonates with whom seizures are suspected. It helps in the confirmation of clinical seizures and helps us to avoid unwanted use of anticonvulsants. Fine. We can confirm the clinical seizure and avoid this unwanted use of anticonvulsant. Clinically, silent seizures can be identified only by the means of EEG. Further, EEG helps to detect the electromechanical dissociation, that is, persistence of electrical seizures after starting anti-seizure medication. It also helps in the discontinuation of the antiepileptic drugs after resolution of the symptomatic seizures. Fine. So by using this electroencephalogram, we can even think about discontinuation of the I don't know what's happening. Discontinuation of anti-epileptic drugs after resolution of the symptomatic seizures. This continuous EEG should be performed for at least 1 hour. Okay, they should perform for at least 1 hour. Interictal EEG is useful for the prognostication of neonates with seizures with certain background abnormalities, denoting high risk for the neurological sequelae. Fine, interictal, that means the um, time duration after the seizure basically, or between two seizures. So that interictal period EEG is used for prognostication of the neonates with seizures. If there is any background abnormality, then it denotes high risk for the neurological sequelae. These include burst suppression pattern, low voltage invariant pattern, and the electrocerebral inactivity. Now the third thing is amplitude integrated EEG. So this amplitude integrated EEG is a bedside investigation is often preferred over the CEG, that is continuous EEG. This one is preferred. Amplitude EEG is preferred because it is a bedside investigation. Is preferred over the continuous EEG in the NICU since it is easier to apply and interpret. As with the conventional EEG, background abnormalities like the burst suppression or the continuous low voltage pattern in AEEG also help in the prognosticating the infant with the seizures, particularly in the setting of HIE. Seizure activity on amplitude EEG is characterized by a rapid rise in both the lower and the upper margins of the trace. Some seizures that are focal or relatively brief are, however, missed by this technique. Okay, so a seizure activity on the amplitude EEG is characterized by what? There is rapid rise in both the lower and the upper margins of the trace. But some seizures which are what? Which are focal, they are relatively brief, however, missed by this technique. Now, the fourth additional investigation is screening for the congenital infections. TORCH screen and the VDRL should be considered in the presence of hepatosplenomegaly, thrombocytopenia, intrauterine growth restriction, and small for gestational age or the chorioretinitis. So, in these conditions, we should keep in mind this TORCH screen and the VDRL. When there is presence of hepatosplenomegaly, thrombocytopenia, intrauterine growth restriction, small for gestational age, or chorioretinitis. Now, the fifth one is the metabolic screen. This includes blood and the urine ketones, fine. Urine reducing substance, blood ammonia, anion gap, urine and the plasma amino acidogram, and the serum and the CSF lactate and the pyruvate ratio. So this was all about this video. The management of neonatal seizures will be dealt in another one. Thank you.